So, um, Kristen, I missed your presentation back in January. I was still on vacation, so I apologize. I
No.
appreciate the fact that you're coming here to Community Board 12 to give us a review of what you discussed. I think that if there's any confusion, which there may be some, that you can clear that up for us, and that way I think the entire board, in particular the committee chairs, but also members of the board can get a better understanding of the open meetings law. So again, welcome to Committee Board 12. And again, most of the committee chairs are here. And like I said, I will, introduce them in a little bit, but I'll go ahead and have you get started. And then hopefully some of them come in and I can do introductions after the fact.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, George, for having me. Under normal circumstances, pre-COVID, a good chunk of my job was traveling all across the state of New York, doing programming for different organizations, different levels of government, and providing open meetings law and freedom of information law training. And of course, that all sort of came to a halt last March. We're going on a year. I can't honestly believe that we're going on a year at this point. But at a certain point, I realized I'm not sure when we're going to get back to normal. So I thought what would be helpful to do is just for me to take the initiative and start offering my own programming, which our office had never done before. And so starting in December, I did my first program on the freedom of information law. In January, I did the open meetings law, and then that's my plan for the foreseeable future. I'm going to alternate every other month between the freedom of information law and the open meetings law doing these programs. Keep an eye on our website. As soon as I figure out the best day to schedule it, I post a note up on our website. I've been circulating, I've been adding people to my mailing list. If you want to be on my mailing list, just shoot me a note and I'll put you on my mailing list, letting you know what the programs are. They're not really going to change much from month to month. So if you've already taken the program, you're probably not going to learn a whole lot new the next time you take it. But if you want to share the information with colleagues and say, listen, I thought this was a helpful overview of either FOIL or the open meetings law, you might want to log on and watch it. I also record them and they're available on our website. If you go to the menu topic, I would like to, on the Committee on Open Government website, there's a menu that says I would like to, and if you hover over the drop-down box, you'll see view training recordings. So up here there's my contact information. You can email me directly, you can call. We're a tiny little office. It's our executive director, Shoshana Boulay, myself, I'm the assistant director, and our administrative assistant, Candace Watson Cottle. So that's it. The three of us are our entire staff of the Committee on Open Government. If you email me, I try to get back to you as quickly as possible. If you call the phone number, sometimes you're going to get voicemail, but we do try to get back to you as quickly as possible. The open meetings law is codified in Article 7 of the Public Officers Law, but of course it's also available on our website, so you don't have to dig too much to locate it. You can just go to our website, pull up a copy of the statute. On our website, you can also pull up copies of advisory opinions that are indexed alphabetically by key phrase and are searchable. So for example, if you're looking for advisory opinions regarding executive session, you're going to go to our advisory opinion index, click on the letter E, scroll down to executive session. We have a whole series of advisory opinions on that subject. The intent of the open meetings law is that it is essential that public business be performed in an open and public manner, and that citizens be fully aware of and be able to observe the performance of public officials. Backtracking just a moment here is that this PowerPoint that I'm going to try to go through a little bit quickly because I'd like to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. So if you feel like I'm skimming over certain things really quickly, it's just because I want to make sure that everybody, if it's things you all know about already, I don't want to waste your time. I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. The PowerPoint is focused on the law as it existed pre-March 2020. And we can talk a little bit about how COVID affected the suspension of the in-person requirement of the open meetings law affected the statute. But the PowerPoint in general deals with the law as it normally exists. The open meetings law states that citizens have the right to attend and listen to the deliberations and decisions that go into making of public policy. Currently under the governor's executive order, if a public body chooses to, it can suspend that in-person, that right to attend in person if they instead offer a remote option, such as we're doing tonight with WebEx. So instead of being able to attend the deliberations, you're remotely attending, and but you're still able to listen to the deliberations and decisions that go into the making of public policy. Under normal circumstances, public bodies are required to make all reasonable efforts to ensure that meetings are held in an appropriate facility which can adequately accommodate members of the public who wish to attend such meetings. So if your community board was having a meeting on a very hot topic issue, you want to make sure that you're holding it in a physical location that can reasonably accommodate the size of the crowd that wants to attend instead of a tiny little conference room, for example. What are public bodies? Well, community boards are public bodies. Any entity for which a quorum is required in order to conduct public business, which consists of 2 or more members and perform a governmental function. So those are the key elements there. Are there 2 or more people acting collectively? Is there a quorum necessary to conduct business? Do they have that authority to act collectively? And then, of course, if you have a public body, and within that public body, there are designated committees that are made up entirely of members of the larger public body, such as the executive committee. That executive committee is also a public body that is subject to the requirements of the open meetings law. Are you having a meeting? The first question is there a quorum present? Do you have a quorum of your public body present at this gathering? Are you there for the purpose of discussing public business? If the answers to those questions are yes, then you are having a meeting, regardless of intent or lack thereof to take action or how you characterize the meeting. There's no legal distinction between workshops or work sessions or agenda sessions or regular meetings. They are all meetings of a public body subject to the requirements of the open meetings law, including notice, public attendance, examples. There are other types of gatherings of a public body that may not rise to a meeting that would trigger the requirements of the open meetings law. I'm not sure if this happens as frequently in the city with community boards, but sometimes at local levels, school boards, municipal bodies, they have site visits where they go to visit a facility. May very well happen with you all too. But if the whole purpose, if the public body is just going for an information gathering, is just basically listening to a presentation by a facilities manager or an architect or a contractor, and just absorbing information, asking questions, but not interacting with each other and deliberating on that information that it's receiving, that site visit does not have to be a meeting subject to the open meetings law. Often it's like, do we want to purchase this property? Do we need to expend money to make improvements to this property? Those are the types of things that a site visit is good for, but it's not very practical sometimes to open those site visits up to the public, which is why there's sort of a way to arrange them so that they don't trigger the requirements of the open meetings law. Retreats and educational seminars may not be subject to the requirements of the open meetings law. If the purpose of a retreat, if your public body is going, for example, for team building skills, learning how to be a good leader, things of that sort, that retreat is likely not going to be a meeting of the public body that's subject to the open meetings law, because you're not there for the purpose of discussing your public body's business. Educational seminars. So for example, if a quorum of the community board logged on to one of my training programs or showed up in person to one of my training programs and was just sitting in the audience and listening to my program, that would not be a meeting of the community board. That would trigger the requirements of the open meetings law. If a committee meeting is open to the public, other members of the full public body are permitted to attend that committee meeting just like any other member of the public. They just have to refrain from engaging with members of that committee, wherein they might give the perception that they were acting as part of the committee. If a non-committee member would like to attend the committee meeting, they have to act as if they were a member of the public, just like any other, with no other additional special privileges. And of course, sometimes around the holidays or things of that nature, a public body may get together for a social gathering. During the summer, you have a barbecue or a picnic, or you have a holiday party during the winter. As long as your members of your public body can refrain from engaging in discussions relating to public business, you're good. You have not triggered the requirements of the open meetings law. Under normal circumstances, the definition of meeting requires a physical presence, or you're permitted to use video conferencing under normal circumstances. If a member of a public body participates by video conference, there are specific requirements that need to be met. But I won't go into too much detail right now because they're sort of on hold. Those requirements are on hold right now and are not really that important. You're not permitted to conduct meetings via teleconference or email under normal circumstances. You're still, even under the COVID executive order, you're not permitted to have a meeting by email, but you could have one by teleconference in theory. Most public bodies prefer to use a video element in addition to the teleconference, but the way the governor's executive order was drafted, in theory, you could just have a teleconference. When I say you can't have a meeting by email, I don't mean to infer that members of a public body can't share information by email. Certainly, if you read an interesting article or you come across some relevant factual information or data that you believe other members of your public body should know about, or you think it would be helpful for them to know, by all means, go ahead and share that information via email. There's no problem with that. We don't object to that. We don't think that triggers any requirements of the open meetings law. Where things may get problematic, where a court may find problems with a public body are occurring, is when the public body starts engaging in substantial deliberations via email, and those substantial deliberations are not reflected to the public. So for example, if a public body does all of its deliberations via email and then shows up to the meeting and just simply votes on an issue, the public gets very antsy about that, gets very irritated, because they feel that perhaps there were secret meetings going on. They feel like they've been left out of an important part of the process. So it's important that the deliberations, not just the decision making occurs in public, but the deliberations that go into those decisions should also occur in public. If you have discussions via email, I just encourage you to repeat them during an open meeting so that the public understands that you've taken all elements of the issue into consideration. In terms of notice of a meeting must include the date, time, and place of the meeting. Right now, under COVID, instead of providing a physical location, you're going to want to provide something like a WebEx address or a Zoom address or a teleconference number, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's just even like a live YouTube or Facebook live streaming, whatever the case may be. Under the executive order, instead of providing a physical location, the notice is going to contain a virtual location. Notice must be given prior to every meeting to the media, must be posted in a designated physical location, and should be on the agency's or public body's website if they have a website. And when I say that notice must be given to the media, I don't mean that you need to purchase a legal notice. So for example, for hearings, statutory public hearings, there's an obligation to purchase a legal notice. But under the open meetings law, there's no obligation to purchase a legal notice. You just need to notify the media that the meeting is going to take place. Under normal circumstances, generally notice must be given at least 72 hours prior to a meeting that is scheduled at least 1 week in advance. For meetings that are scheduled on short notice, notice must be given as soon as reasonably practicable, to the extent practicable at a reasonable time prior to the meeting. The open meetings law is silent. It doesn't say when you're permitted to have meetings on short notice. So the statute is silent, but the courts haven't been silent. The courts have weighed in on this and essentially have said, you better have a good reason for having a meeting on short notice. You better have a good reason for having a meeting on less than 1 week notice, or excuse me, scheduled at least less than 1 week in advance and with less than 72 hours notice. For example, would some sort of harm occur if you didn't have the meeting tomorrow or the day after? If no harm would occur by waiting, the courts have generally held that the public body should have done so. Minutes of an open meeting must include a record or summary of all motions, proposals, resolutions, or any other matter formally voted on. There's a provision of the Freedom of Information law that adds a requirement that in addition to the minutes including a record of the results of the vote, it also must include, there must be a record of how each member voted. So for example, if the vote was unanimous, there doesn't need to be, like, the minutes don't need to include a breakdown of how that each member voted yay or nay. But for example, if you have a 9-member board and it was a split with 5 yays and 4 nays, then your minutes should reflect who voted in favor and who voted against. Minutes are only required of executive session if the public body acts in executive session, if they vote in executive session. If the public body does not vote in executive session, there's no need to prepare separate minutes of that executive session. They must be available to the public upon request within 2 weeks of an open session and 1 week for an executive session. This doesn't mean we get questions all the time about minutes not being posted on a public body's website or an agency's website. And while that's a wonderful thing for public bodies to do because it saves time and energy for all parties, if they do post their minutes on their website, it's actually not a statutory requirement. There's nothing in the open meetings law currently that requires a public body to post its minutes on the website. It's a great thing to do, don't get me wrong, I highly encourage it. It's just not a statutory requirement. It's just that the minutes must be made available upon request within 2 weeks of an open meeting. It does not matter whether the records have been unapproved or still in draft form. If they've been prepared and someone asks for them, you must make them available upon request. Any meeting of a public body that is open to the public must be open to being photographed, broadcast, webcast, or otherwise recorded and or transmitted by audio or video means. If somebody comes into your meeting with an audio or video camera, or audio recording device or video camera and would like to record your meeting, you must let them. They don't need your permission. They don't need to give you advance notice. They can just set up, you can establish reasonable rules regarding the use of recording devices to ensure that the people that are recording your meetings are not being disruptive, that are not getting in the way of the public body being able to conduct its business. But as long as they're not being disruptive, as long as they're not getting in people's faces, for example, anyone is permitted to photograph, record, live stream the meetings. The agency itself or the public body itself is not obligated to record its meetings under normal circumstances. Right now you are because of the governor's executive order. So because we're having this meeting via WebEx, there's an obligation to record and later transcribe the meeting. For the transcription requirement under the governor's executive order, I certainly encourage public bodies to take advantage of any AI, artificial intelligence, or automatic transcription services that are available. I don't want agencies to have to expend a lot of money or effort in preparing these transcripts. I think most of the time no one's ever even going to ask for the transcript, so I worry that it would be a waste of energy and resources. So for example, if WebEx, Zoom, if you have the type of program that will prepare a transcript for you, please take advantage of that for the governor's executive order. For executive session, when a public body would like to enter into executive session, you need to remember that an executive session is a part of an open meeting. It shouldn't be prior to an open meeting, and it can't be separate or standalone from an open meeting. There needs to be a process needs to occur during an open meeting prior to the public body going into executive session. A motion needs to be made that contains enough specific information that allows the public to know that you're going into executive session for a proper purpose. It does not need to be so specific that it defeats the purpose of the executive session, but it should contain enough details so the public and the public body itself and the public listening knows that you're going in for a proper purpose. So for example, instead of saying I move to go into executive session for personnel reasons, in our opinion, that's not enough. It doesn't contain enough information to reflect that you're going in for a proper purpose. Something more appropriate may be, we would like to enter into executive session to discuss applications that we've received for the district manager's position. And we're going to review those applications in executive session. Certainly you don't need to identify the names of the people who submitted applications, but that motion would be specific enough so that the public knows you're going in for a proper purpose. And of course, the motion needs to pass upon a majority vote. I don't want to spend a great amount of time talking about all of the reasons you can go into executive session. If you ever have specific questions, we can talk about those individually, but all of the reasons you're allowed to go into executive session are contained right in the statute. If you don't see it in the statute, there's not going to be a reason that's going to allow you to go into executive session. I just mentioned this, it's sort of my little pet peeve about people saying they're going into executive session to discuss personnel matters. It's just not enough. The language of the statute is very specific. It says you're going in to discuss the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. And what's interesting here is too, this also allows a public body to discuss, for example, maybe proposals received in response to an RFP, or perhaps you're looking to hire a new law firm. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a person. It could be an entire law firm, or it could be an entire accounting firm, or whatever the case may be. So, but you're discussing the proposals you've received to decide which of them to choose, and it's a matter leading to perhaps the appointment of a particular corporation. So that section of the law isn't just about personnel. Public participation is not required by the open meetings law. If a public body would like to set aside a time for public participation and public comment, they can. You can establish reasonable rules for that public comment time and public participation time. For example, many public bodies establish time limits. Some establish content limitations. Not in terms like, for example, you want to be careful about First Amendment issues, but for example, if you say we're only going to accept public comments for items that are on the agenda, that may very well might be an appropriate limitation. Or we are only accepting public comments for issues relating to business before the community board. Because sometimes you'll have people, as I'm sure anyone who's been involved in government at any level has come across somebody who, if you give them a microphone, will talk nonstop about anything that's been bothering them for the past year. You just want to make sure any rules that you establish are implemented fairly and consistently. So you want to make sure that, for the person that really annoys you and bugs the heck out of you, you're applying the same rules to that person as you do to everybody else. You want to make sure that if you let the people that are in favor of a particular issue speak for 3 minutes, you also let the people that are not in favor of that same issue speak for that same amount of time. You just want to be consistent. Keep in mind that hearings are not the same as meetings. There are other statutory, there are other statutes, I should say, that govern hearings. And those other statutes, or maybe in your case, for example, New York City codes, that are going to dictate how you need to accept public comment. But that's not going to be addressed by the open meetings law, because the open meetings law really just has to do with meetings of the public body, not hearings where there's an expectation that the public will weigh in. There's a provision that is fairly new, but actually not too new at this point. I'm going to say it's maybe about 10 years old at this point, that records scheduled to be discussed during an open meeting, including any proposed resolutions, laws, rules, or regulations or amendments thereto, or any records or portions that are public, under the Freedom of Information Law, must be made available upon request prior to or at the meeting. The law also says that those same records shall be made available online prior to the meeting if the agency maintains a regularly and routinely updated website and utilizes a high-speed internet connection. So if there are any proposed resolutions, and you have them ready for the committee to review, for your community board to review, if you are able to, you should also be posting them online so that the public can follow along with the discussions that the community board is having on those proposed resolutions, laws, regulations, etc. So we talked about executive session very briefly earlier. And now I'm just going to talk again very briefly about the second mechanism for meeting behind closed doors. Often there's confusion of these two issues. So an executive session, as I mentioned earlier, is a part of an open meeting. There's a procedure that needs to be followed for entering into executive session. This second mechanism is in a separate section of the open meetings law that's referred to as exemptions. And if an exemption applies, if the topic of discussion fits into one of these exemptions, it's as if the open meetings law does not exist. None of the requirements of the open meetings law would apply. So let's use the three exemptions are: first are judicial or quasi-judicial proceedings, except proceedings of the Public Service Commission and zoning boards of appeals. The second exemption is deliberations of political committees, conferences, and caucuses. They are exempt from the open meetings law. And the third is matters made confidential by federal or state law. A very common example here are conversations that are made confidential by the attorney-client privilege. So for example, if your community board needs to meet with its attorney to request and receive legal advice, it can do so outside the scope of the open meetings law entirely. It does not need to notice a meeting. It does not need to let the public know that a meeting is occurring, as long as that gathering, I'm going to use the term gathering, is for the sole purpose of requesting and receiving legal advice, is for the sole purpose of having a conversation that would be covered by the attorney-client privilege. That conversation can occur entirely outside the scope of an open meeting. None of the provisions of the open meetings law would apply. Oftentimes people get that confused with the litigation. The executive session allows a public body to enter into executive session to discuss proposed, pending, or current litigation. So those are two different things. The litigation exception allows the public body itself to discuss, regardless of whether the attorney is there or not, in executive session, litigation that the public body is involved in. Here, it doesn't have to involve litigation. It just has to actively involve your legal representation where that attorney is providing legal advice. Non-compliance and enforcement. Enforcement of the open meetings law is through the initiation of a civil practice law and rules Article 78 proceeding. Any aggrieved party can bring an Article 78 proceeding against a public body alleging violations of the open meetings law. If the petitioner is successful in its allegations of non-compliance, the court has the authority to award costs and attorney's fees to the petitioner. They can, and if they believe that the violation of the open meetings law is significant enough, they can invalidate the action entirely. Many times, however, a court may find that a public body did violate provisions of the open meetings law, but perhaps it was such a technical violation that they don't feel that it rose to the level where it was appropriate to invalidate the action. And the last thing that the open meetings law specifically includes is that the court has the authority to require the public body to take training from our office. So you guys are getting that penalty without even having done anything wrong. Anyone is welcome to contact our office. You do not need to be a government employee or official. You don't need to be a member of the media. Everyone is welcome to contact our office either by phone or by email. I give you my direct email address at the beginning of the presentation, but also here on the screen is our office email address. So for example, if you email me and it bounces back because I'm on vacation or something like that, you can always email this general Coog address, and either Candace or Shoshana or whoever is currently employed by the Committee on Open Government should be able to respond to your questions at that time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to go back to the presentation. I'm not sure if we would do, if we wanted to, I should have said at the beginning we could use the chat function, or if people just want to pop up with and use their microphones and ask questions, that's fine too, whatever you all want to do.
Well, first of all, Ms. McNeil, thank you very, very much. I actually was going to try something different tonight, but I'm not going to do that. I was going to try to have a function where people raise their hands. But at this point, you know, I had a couple of questions, but I'm going to, as you said, most of the people here are committee chairs first. So if you would allow me to introduce you to them. So we have our as I'm looking at them on the screen, our Library and Cultural Affairs Committee Chair, Ms. Joan Klein. You raise your hand, please. We have our Not-for-Profit Committee Chair, Ms. Beatrice Cornell. We have our Legislative Committee Chair, Ms. Carla Borsatti. We have our brand new Parks and Recreation Committee Chair, Mrs. Denise Bond.
Welcome.
We have our first Vice Chair of the Community Board, Mr. Jerry Bennett. We have our Housing Chair, Mr. Robert Hall. We have our second Vice Chair of the Community Board, Mr. John Isaac. We have our Secretary and Economic Development Committee Chair, Ms. Jude Benitez. We have our Education Committee Chair, Ms. Tolene Dickerson, by the way, whose birthday is today.
Happy birthday.
Those that don't know. And I'm looking at people on the video. We have our Vice Chair for the Land Use Committee, Mr. Attorney Harry Singh. And of course, we also have Ursula, who of course is the heart and soul of the Community Board. So with that being said, I'm going to open this up to any questions.
Hey, Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Stricker. Well, Mr. Stricker, you don't have one. Okay. Yeah, you're okay. So Mr. Stricker is just the man of the plan. And so, like I say, chair of land use and bylaws, which of course is one of our ad hoc committees, and everything else is Mr. Stricker. So with that being said, I want to open this up for questions for our board members. So you can, I think I have this up where you can unmute yourselves if you have any questions, and then ask. Actually, hang on for a second. I'm sorry. Yes, you can unmute yourselves if you have any questions.
And two, if you think of something tomorrow or the next day, that's what I'm here for.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and get it started. So, so here's the thing. So here's what I thought I heard. So I want to bring a scenario together. So let's say that you want to have a brainstorming session, and let's say that there were four board members, right? We're just board members. We just want to have a brainstorming session, not a committee meeting. If I heard you correctly, you can have that brainstorming session as long as it's documented and then brought into a committee meeting. Is that correct?
So when you say like, so you have four board members, how large is the full public body there? Like, it's not a quorum.
No, it's not a quorum. It's just
It's not a quorum.
we're
Just
just
four.
talking. Right.
Yeah. No, there's nothing, if it's less than a quorum of either the committee or of the full community board, depending on, on who the people are, it's not a meeting that's going to trigger the requirements of the open meetings law. That's, yeah, as you say, Michael, I just encourage people, for example, if one of those four people has significant concerns with a proposal, instead of just keeping that behind closed doors, I think it's important to say, okay, I had these concerns about this proposal, but my colleagues helped me understand da 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 da. And if you have those conversations in public, it really does make a world of difference in terms of how the public perceives how its representatives are being transparent with them.
Well, I mean, I totally agree with that. And the one thing that, that I pride myself on is trying to be as transparent as possible. Now, hopefully my board members will agree with that. And in particular, I give the committee chairs autonomy to run the committees, as they see fit. I think the bottom line is if we're talking about ideas, because sometimes board members call each other, hey, I have an
Yeah.
idea. And my thing is, I'm like, well, talk to so and so and so and so. And it's just board members just conversing.
Yeah, and not every idea needs to be brought up. I agree, Michael.
Exactly, exactly.
Not
Okay,
every,
I'm just trying to
no,
make certain.
no, sorry,
Okay,
I didn't mean to
okay,
give that impression. Not
okay,
every conversation needs to be repeated in public. Not every,
okay.
for example, if you, like you say, you have a brainstorming session and people throw out a dozen ideas, maybe 11 of the 12 are crappy ideas. Yeah, that all, you don't have to go through all of that again in public. I just think it's where that really substantial, where you're talking about the pros and cons of a particular issue. That's where my concern lies.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for the clarity. We appreciate it. Yes, Beatrice, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. I just want clarity as well, right? So for example, I'm the chair of a committee. There's 5 of us in total. I understand we can't meet unless it's public and open, but I did hear somewhere there that you were saying that we have a teleconference. That's okay?
Right now, with under the governor's executive order, the executive order states that you can have a meeting, you can bar in-person attendance as long as you afford audio or video remote access. Under normal circumstances, no. Under normal circumstances, it either has to be in person or through the use of video conferencing. But right now, in theory, instead of us doing a WebEx, we could have all just dialed into a teleconference number, and that would have been compliant with the open meetings law, or excuse me, not compliant with the open meetings law, compliant with the governor's executive order.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
My question is, sometimes developers come to us and they want to have meetings outside of the committee structure. They want to present the project to us. Usually the chair of the land use committee, for example, the chair of the community board, maybe a handful of other board members. This came up a couple of years ago, and I'm just giving you the context because I reached out, somebody who was a reporter, but also the chief of staff to State Senator Benedetto's office, reached out because he wanted to be a part of a meeting that we were having in regards to a mall that a developer was holding. It was a multi-community board meeting. We had Community Board 10, or we had invited Community Board 10 and Community Board 11, two adjacent community boards. Anyway, long story short, they tried to invite themselves to this meeting because they got wind of it. We said no, that this was a private meeting. They complained to the borough president's office. Borough president's office stated your statute that says any meeting with two or more community board members constitutes a meeting and requires OML, but that also contradicts what you stated earlier. I fast forward to another thing that we were doing that the borough president, the same person actually who told me this, I reached out to him. I was like, oh, hey, I thought you said X in regards to two board members. And he was like, oh, no, I gave you the wrong information. I'm sorry. What is the proper way to do that? Can we do that, for example? Can we have a meeting with a developer that just wants to lay it out? And because with my previous chairs, they were all gung-ho. I'm now hesitant after reading or going through your presentation.
Yeah. It's going to depend on, it's going to come down to numbers. So like Beatrice mentioned earlier that she has a committee of 5. If it was a presentation to her committee, for example, and you had 3 or more, because 3 being a quorum of 5, then that would have triggered the open meetings law. Now, how big is the community board at full strength? Everybody?
46 board members.
All right, so that's a pretty big number.
Actually, I think it's 45 at the moment, George, but that's it's about 46, 45, 46, somewhere around there.
All right, so let's put committees aside. Let's say that the presentation, the developer wants to make a presentation, not specifically to any particular committee, which is a smaller number and is going to trigger the open meetings law more easily, but to the community board as a whole. And so you have the head, it's a 46, 45 member community board, and 23 or 24 is going to be a quorum. As long as you keep it less than that, say you invite 10 members from the community board, each representing maybe different committees that would want to have a say in this issue, you're not going to trigger the requirements of the open meetings law. And part of the reason is this really it's not about secrecy. It's just about, if you only have 10 community board members there, there's no authority. They're all essentially acting as individual community board members. There's no authority to act collectively until the quorum is triggered. And that's why there's that distinction. Once you hit a quorum, a public body has the legal authority to act collectively. Less than a quorum, no authority. So that's why it's okay for you to have a meeting with less than a quorum without public notice, and it's not okay. So if you want to have the type of meeting that you described, just make sure you keep it to a number that's smaller than what would trigger a quorum. You want to keep it, 10, 15 max or whatever it is. And you can invite the people that would, from the community board that you believe might have the most interest in the subject, the committee heads, whatever the case may be. And in my opinion, that would not trigger the requirements of the open meetings law.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have a completely separate question in regards to OML. One of the requests that we had, it's post-COVID, whenever we achieved that.
Yeah.
My understanding was you could never participate via video conference and have your vote count, or teleconference and have your vote count. I've always argued with the borough president's office. We've even reached out to Senator Biagi's office to amend the law post-COVID so that we could have a hybrid where you could participate virtually and also in person. What do you see on that?
I think we're going to go. This is just my personal opinion. I think people have learned to appreciate the value That in fact, I think it makes meetings more available to the public than ever before instead of less available. I think people really like the idea of being able to log on from their computers at 7 o'clock at night instead of having to trek out, into the cold night air to go to a meeting. I think there's a lot of value in this, but it has to be a legislative change. So, like as you said, talking to your state representatives is a good way to pursue that and ask them to perhaps co-sponsor or sign on to any existing legislative proposals that would allow that. In terms of voting counts, the only way that a member under non-COVID, non-executive order circumstances, the only way that a member of a public body can participate and have their vote count if they're not there in person, they can do it through video conference, but there's a lot of requirements that go along with that person participating by video conference. Let's say, for example, I'm going to use the example of our Committee on Open Government because it's a little easier because we're a statewide committee. We have people that live in Buffalo, Syracuse, Rome, New York City, Albany. So we have people that have been appointed to the committee that live all over the state of New York. So when we have a meeting of the Committee on Open Government, we set up 3 different meeting locations, one in Buffalo, one in Albany, and one in New York City. And we video conference. And so everybody, when we notice the meeting, we notice that the meeting will be, that we're going to have, say, for example, maybe the primary location, so to speak, is in Albany because that's where staff is, that's where I am. And then we have video conferencing from New York City and video conferencing from Buffalo. Those committee members that are participating, but from New York City and from Buffalo, are fully participating and their votes will count as long as we provide notice that those members are participating via video conference. And here's the kicker, though, is that the public is welcome to attend from any of those locations. So if you open up a video conferencing site from Buffalo, you have to let the public attend from Buffalo. If you are in New York City and somebody is on vacation in Boca Raton and wants to video conference into your community board meeting, you can let them, but notice of the meeting has to state that John Jones is participating via video conference from 123 Sesame Street in Boca Raton, Florida, and you're welcome to attend from that location. Nobody's going to fly to Florida to from that location, but it's what the law requires.
Okay, so I think Mr. Hall, did you have a question? You didn't? Okay. Mrs. Bond?
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned about the transcribing of the notes from a meeting and then the committee report. So the transcribing, if I understood this correctly, is the minute by minute of what happened in the meeting. And the committee report is just the general sense of what took place.
Yeah, the open meetings law all the time requires that minutes be prepared that reflect just, it can be very basic. So the minutes really only need to say, here's what the resolution was, here's what the motion was, it passed by 5-4, and here's how everybody voted. It does not have to go into any great detail. There doesn't need to be a record of the discussion that occurred. It just has to reflect any actions taken during the meeting. So that's the open
The
meetings
actual
law.
outcomes, the outcomes.
Exactly. So that's what the open meetings law requires all of the time with regard to meeting minutes. Right now, with the governor's executive order, the executive order states that you can prohibit in-person attendance and instead have your meetings via remote access. But if you're going to do that, you have to record and later transcribe the meeting. I don't love this transcription requirement in my personal opinion, and I am not representing the executive chamber in this in any way, shape, or form. I think it's a little bit of overkill, but that's just my personal opinion. So in terms of the transcription, as you say, Ms. Bond, it's a word for word transcription that's required. But if WebEx will do it for you, if Zoom will do it for you, even if it's not the the perfect version, I would just let it do it for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Someone had a check.
Ms. McNeil, let's see, because I have another question, but I'm trying to let my committee chairs ask as many questions as they have. Access, so Mr. Hall, yes, no, who? You're pointing, George, I don't get it. Where you pointing at?
In the chat.
Oh, the chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. All right, so Mrs. Carla Barsati says that, yes, there is another, which is true, there is another presentation about how to take minutes. And I think that was a three-parter that we did during the summer months. I think Carla, Jerry, and myself and some other board members attended that. So there's another presentation about how to take minutes. And she states that, yes, only the results need to be reported. So under no circumstances do we need to report the deliberations. And so, you know, you're right about that, Mrs. McNeil. And again, I think that was sent out by our district manager and Ursula back in the summer months. I think it was. I got to go back and check and see, but I know that that was a three-parter that was sponsored by the parliamentarians of New York City.
Yeah.
So, and as I said before, I think that was done in August, September timeframe of 2020. That I do know. So I'm going to take the liberty to ask this question and then move forward. So let's suppose that I'm going to give you actually an actual example that actually happened. So I have some new members on, about 6 of them, and actually 2 of them, actually 3 of them are on this call. And I wanted them to get together to brainstorm about something. There wasn't a committee. It was just it was just a brainstorm.
Yeah.
That is not considered a quorum, being that they're quote unquote new and they were just talking about ideas to bring to the board, right? So
Yeah.
how would that qualify? I guess, so the point of clarity, how would that qualify under the open meetings law?
Only if they were, all 3 of them were members of the same committee. So
But
for
they're not a
example,
member of any committee. This was just members.
Nope, then it didn't trigger any requirements.
Yeah, okay,
The only time that small number is going to end up triggering the open meetings law is, in your cases, it's going to have to do with committees. So if you have a 5-member committee and 3 members of that committee are gathering for the purpose of discussing committee business,
okay.
that's when the OML is going to get triggered. But other than that, a small number of your community board is generally not going to trigger the open meetings law.
So this was something that actually happened actually about a month or 2 ago. So I had an idea, and one of my new members took it upon themselves, which I'm so proud of them, all of them, to come up with an idea, to come up with ways to outreach other than what we're doing. And, you know, that triggered a huge discussion. And that's why I want to get clarity on that. But this is not, they were not a committee. They were just members getting together to discuss an item.
Perfectly fine.
That's perfect. Okay, so that doesn't trigger OML.
Correct.
Great. All right, great. Thank you. Any other? Okay, yes, Beatrice. Actually, I said 4 members, 4 the new members here. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And I just want to be clear, because I do understand now the logistics where OML is triggered. But for my committee, if we wanted to have just like planning research kind of conversations in between committee meetings, it can only happen one-on-one via phone call.
Likelihood, yes, because if you have once you have 3 members of the committee discussing business that the committee isn't directly involved in, committee business, so to speak, then you're going to trigger the OML. So you're going to want to have one-on-one conversations about that.
Okay, Ursula?
No, because I'm confused.
Okay.
That was all because I was told, in my understanding from the last presentation that we went to, if one or more member is discussing board business, then it's a no-go.
That wouldn't be the open meetings law. I mean, I don't know if other policies have been implemented, but it's not, it wouldn't be, it's the quorum. The quorum is what matters. If you have a quorum of a public body, and with the community boards, there's going to be 2 levels of quorum. One is a quorum of the full community board, which is going to be 23 or 24, which is more than half of the full community board. That's one level of quorum. The other level of quorum is an actual committee. If you have a 5-member committee, a majority of the total membership of that committee is going to be 3 people. So that's what triggers the open meetings law, the quorum, when you have a quorum of a public body gathering for the purpose of discussing public business.
So if I have 3 3 committee chairs discussing something, is that allowed?
I don't see why not, because they wouldn't they're not all on the same committee, correct?
They're on the executive.
They're 3, oh, they're on the executive committee. Well, how many people are on the executive committee?
I think, what is it, 11?
It's about 11, yeah, something like that. All the committee chairs
So
and
that-
the executive officers.
So
then you
that
just
would
wanna
have to be the quorum then.
The quorum, then say it's 11, then your quorum is 6.
Six.
If you have only 3, then it's not triggering the open meetings law.
Got you.
I mean,
Thank you.
there may be other issues at play, and I don't want to, like, for example, maybe your local, your attorneys or whatever are providing you advice about what to do in addition to the open meetings law.
Yeah, because some stuff we got from the borough president's office also.
Yeah, and they may be providing guidance in addition to what's required to the open meetings law. So I just want to make sure I'm clarifying that I'm only speaking about what the open meetings law requires.
I got you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and just hang on, George. I think Miss Clyde had her hand up first, George, and then you yes, Miss Clyde. No, okay, George, you're up. So I think Miss Clyde had her hand up.
I think the issue for us is that this presents a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
Because we have had situations where items have been discussed and then they show up on an agenda for a voting item and we don't know how they got there.
Yes,
that's why I'm saying, for me, transparency, as a matter of fact, I can say this clearly, we're the only community board in the city of New York that actually broadcast our board meetings. We pay a lot of money for this on BronxNet, on public access TV. In addition to that, we now have a YouTube channel, and we stream Facebook Live and BronxNet.org during the meeting, so people can participate that way as well. So transparency is very big to me, but the problem that I have is that what it sounds like is that as long as I don't have a quorum of either the board or committee, I can basically have any discussion I want, or board members can. Yes.
Right, but then too, I mean, there's also a difference between what the open meetings law requires and then what reflects well on your community board. And I think that's what I think your point is about things showing up on the agenda without ever having a discussion.
Yeah.
That really annoys the public. When something shows up and a public body just votes on it without ever talking about it, that really, I know I get calls about it all the time, where people are frustrated with things like that. So just as it's not that these small gatherings, less than a quorum gatherings are not so yes, these small, less than a quorum gatherings are not subject to the open meetings law. That doesn't mean that perhaps these conversations, and this is kind of going back to, I know this is all over the place. Michael and I were having this conversation earlier about conversations that these small groups have that might be you want to repeat during the larger open meeting, and other ones that maybe you don't need to have. And I think what's important to share in an open setting are the pros and cons of an issue, are the elements that went into the decision making, the actual deliberations. Do I think you have to repeat every word that occurred outside of the open meeting? No, of course not. That's just not practical or reasonable. I just think the public has, I think it reflects well on the community boards or any public body when the public feels that they have a good understanding of why that governing body came to the decision it came to.
And my final question will be, I think, about voting. We have had situations recently that we have asked the people who we have votes in front of us to leave the meeting before we take the vote. I don't know why. Can you explain we can't ask anybody to leave if we want to take a vote, right?
No.
Okay. Because that happened in our land use committee meeting. It's happened in other meetings. We cannot ask anybody to leave to have a vote.
No.
Okay.
And
Any
that,
advice on when we should take a vote? Because we also wait until the end of the meeting to take votes.
That's entirely,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
entirely at your discretion. Whatever works best
Yeah.
for you.
but I mean, that's a point of clarity because, as I said, I think for me, because I'm guilty of the last infraction, mentioned. So now I know, if we have bodies there that, they can hear our vote, they can hear our deliberations. From what I saw from the presentation, they can actually hear us deliberate whether it's favorable to them or not. And then, we take the vote because it's all open to the public. Okay, great. So again, as I said, that's learning for me. And I think the last point of clarity for me was is that I'm just take that same land use committee. So they have about 10 to 11 members on that, or 10 members, not including myself. So it's 11. So that would mean that a quorum, in order to have a quorum, they would need at least 6 members to
Correct. Yeah.
have a quorum because it's 50 plus 1. So if, let's say, 4 members were talking outside of the committee meeting, right? That does not constitute a quorum, therefore does not trigger the open meetings law, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I think I've got it now. Okay, great. So are there any more questions for our guest? Well, if not, Ms. McNeil, thank you so much for attending it, because I think, as I said before, this was extremely helpful for me personally. I think it obviously helped some members of our support staff, but also for our committee chairs as well, with the exception of 2. All of our committee chairs are here tonight, as well as the executive officers are here as well. So again, thank you very, very much for attending. And like I said, we have your email address.
Yep.
And I know I can speak for myself, and I'm sure if we have any questions, we'll be contacting you. And obviously, we'll be referring to your presentation. So again, thank you very, very much.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. You all have a good night. Stay safe.
Not a problem. You do the same. And
Bye.
take care.
Good night.
Okay. Okay, everybody. So I'm going to make this relatively quick, and I forgot to gavel the meeting in to order. So the meeting was gaveled into order at around 1 minute after 7 for the record. So again, I apologize for that. Let me put my glasses on. So I just want to acknowledge some things and then go through the agenda. I'm not going to go about putting it up on the screen. Hopefully everybody got a copy of the agenda. I just want to point something out too as well before I forget. So as I said, Tolene's birthday is today, but I forgot 2 other February birthdays on the email blast. So Mrs. Claude's birthday is sometime this month. This is Joan Claude. She's here on this call as well. So happy birthday to you, Mrs. Claude. And April last, her birthday was on the 4th, which I missed that, which is 1 day before Anthony Reed. So I'm going to send that out in a note to everybody. So, but if you get to either one of them before, well, let's say Mrs. Claude is here, but if you get to either one of them before, just reach out and wish them a happy birthday. Okay. So let's go down this real quick. So committee reports and recommendations. I don't think there's anything that's requiring a vote, right? So for the upcoming board meeting from any of your committees, anything requiring a vote?
No.
Say hi.
No?
Somebody
Okay.
just came to visit grandma. I'm sorry to interrupt y'all, but I just,
Well, that's okay. You know what?
I just got a guest.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Ursula has a question.
Yeah, I see. Yes, Ursula.
Economic is gonna need a vote.
Okay, where's Ms. Benitez at? Okay, there she is.
Maybe I misunderstood you. So for the board meeting, she's
Yeah, for
gonna
the board meeting. Yeah, a vote for the board meeting. Yeah. So, Ms. Benitez, what are we going to be voting on?
I don't know yet. I don't know until I have my meeting.
Which is Thursday, right? Okay. All right.
If I don't have a good representation and all the documents in place, I'm not going to recommend anymore.
Okay.
Ursula, waiting to win, okay?
Okay. That's fair enough. So, okay. So right now we'll just say that there isn't any until, and we'll know, obviously on Thursday. Okay. I do
Michael.
know. Yes, sir, Mr. Stricker.
Yes, we have to have a land use committee meeting on the application to reactivate a driveway, I believe by Citibank on Baychester and Strang Avenues.
Right.
There was
That's on the 8th,
application-
though, Mr. Stricker.
Excuse me?
I said that's going to be on the 8th, right? Your land use meeting.
You know something? Nobody told me.
Well, Mr. Stricker, it's the second Monday of every month.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just turned 80, so you gotta give me a break.
Well, Mr. Stricker, you didn't tell us when your birthday was. So
It was
if
in
I missed
October.
it- What's that?
It was in October.
Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Stricker, okay, I think I acknowledge you, but happy birthday to you. Okay. So that's fine. Okay. So yeah, that's gonna be on the 8th. Your
On
meeting.
the 8th. All right, that's good.
Yes, sir. In fact, I want to say the meeting notice has been sent out already.
I have not seen it yet. Like I said, I have very limited access to a computer.
Yes,
So
sir.
sometimes I see it quite late.
Yes, sir.
And
Well,
it
that's
was-
okay because your vice chair is on. So, we got you, Mr. Stricker.
Okay. Thank you very much for your participation in my
Oh,
land
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So let me, before I get into record keeping, let me ask this question. Now, I know that I always enjoy the Library and Cultural Affairs Committee meetings. And so I know Mrs. Clyde and her team was talking about a Black History presentation. And I guess my question is that something that you ladies still want to do? Yes. Okay. So let's schedule that. I won't say because I think we want as many people as possible on that, right, Mrs. Clyde?
Yes, sir.
What are we thinking about?
In terms of what?
No, as far as what's your presentations, because I know we have a presentation on campaign finance. We have as I told you, we have a presentation on campaign finance that we have to do, and only other voting item we have because I know we got to vote on, and I'm gonna mention this in a little bit, the non-participating board members. So we have to have a discussion and a final vote on them.
1 second. Well, if my memory serves me right and is correct, I think at the last meeting, we decided that we would work or bond with the library because they're the ones who already have this set up for the book club discussion. So we are supposed to join them. And I think it's this Thursday the 18th.
Right.
At 11 a.m.
Right. I guess here's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to get it in my mind as to how to program the meeting, because as I said before, one of the things that we're going to try to do is get everybody out at a decent time, because I hear you when everybody says we take too long. And as I said last month, it wasn't my fault. So I'm trying to make certain that we get in. So how long are we going to need for the Black History presentation?
Say about 5 minutes. It shouldn't be more than that. We'll
Okay.
do the presentation.
Okay.
We'll just talk about 4 inventors. I think it's 4, and it's just a few lines about each one.
Okay. So you and your team put it together, and then I'll just schedule it during the meeting. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll
Okay.
send you a copy. We'll send you a copy so you will look it over before the meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Claude.
You're welcome.
Happy birthday to you as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next part about committee reports. So you heard what Ms. O'Neill said about committee reports. Board members, we really have to get up on that. I mean, from what I've seen this month, I haven't seen anything from your committee, Mrs. Claude, yet, even though you're doing something. I know that Health had a meeting. I haven't seen anything from Mr. Lanzano, and of course, Ms. Carla Barsati, but of course, she's super busy. Carla may have to designate somebody on her committee to do the minutes because she's, does a minute for the general board meeting as well as executives. So, Carla, I may suggest to you that you may want to get somebody else on your committee to help you to do the minutes. But I want to have George and Ursula talk about the audit that's ongoing because I know that they're updating our website. And I know a number of you have submitted minutes. And, yes, Ms. Clyde.
Okay, we're talking about minutes and we're talking about reports. To me, they're more or less the same.
Yes.
So are you looking for two reports, minutes and report?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I mean, to me, minutes and reports are interchangeable.
Yes.
And so I'm just talking about one term. So pick your term. Minutes, you pick, I use minutes, some use reports, however you want to do it.
Okay, well, mine is ready. I just have to send it over.
Okay.
I worked on it last night.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. George, you or Ursula want to touch base on the audit and the update to the website?
My understanding is they're working on it now. Our website, I should say, as far as the audit, they'll let us know. The controller's office will reach out when they're done with it, and then they'll get back to us. But in the interim, as I mentioned at our last full board meeting, we did create the YouTube channel. It's there now for everybody. We're working with a gentleman by the name of I think it's Alfredo Ronell from from MIS in the city DOT. Do it. Thank you. So hopefully they'll get it. I mean, I was happy because he had said that he had done it, and then he was referring to another community board. So he said that he was going to work on us next. But he does have all the content. Ursula sent him all the information. So, hopefully, like I said, it'll be there. We've submitted everything as well in terms of the new calendar, even though the new calendar is not up. But like I said, they have all the information.
Right, and I need to make some adjustments to that per your suggestion, George. So don't.
Oh, okay.
You made a suggestion that is correct, and so, but I just didn't want to talk about it at this meeting. But there's some things that you mentioned that are right that I need to fix, and so we will work on that because I know that you and Ursula were talking about that. I think when I was in the office last week, y'all were on a call or something like that, as it pertains to updating the website.
I
want to say y'all were on a call. I know that I was in office and you guys.
Yeah, no, the only call I remember, we were talking to the congressman's office. I don't.
No, I know that, but I think you were home and Ursula was in the office because I was there. Anyway, the bottom line is that I know that you guys are working on it. So I just wanted you guys to report out to the board what was going on with that. Tolene?
Yes. I just wanted to say while we're talking about working on the website, I think I spoke to, no, I can't remember who I spoke to, but I spoke about the fact that our mission statements, our individual mission statements that's on the website, I don't know, for me, I know mine severely needed to be updated. So I'm hoping that, we do something about everybody looking at their mission statement and seeing there was some, retired teacher stuff, some grammar errors and some other different things. So, hopefully we could do that and have our members of each of our committees look at our committee mission statements.
Okay, so I think you did mention that, Tolene, and I think one of the things that, because I appreciate that, and I know that I asked our first vice chair to kind of sort of lead that effort for us to, get our committees, somewhat a little bit more, even though you guys are organized, but just to, flush out some things that I think that she has some ideas that I think are spot on. And I know you had mentioned that to me privately, and I think that's fantastic. So, look on the website now, committee chairs, and look at your mission statements and see if it agrees with, and these are for the standing committees, and see if it agrees with what your goals are. And if not, then I think, as I said, Ms. Bennett is excellent at that, and can get you guys, help you out with that. Okay. All right. So I want to talk about item number 2. So, and again, I'm going to have George in on this. So I'm going to start this off and, have him give us a little bit more of an update. So if you guys remember, we had talked about, having city planning and housing preservation and development come in to talk with us. And I think that, we'd come up with some ideas. George had an excellent idea as to how to facilitate this. And, we were still planning. And then, of course, Christmas hit and Thanksgiving hit and then Christmas. And then, of course, we're kind of sort of, but he's been, working behind the scenes. I mean, I've met with them, as chair of the board, but, obviously they want to come in and meet with committee chairs as well as the board. So I'm going to turn this over to George again, because I know he's been working on this behind the scenes.
So I sent an email to, well, I shouldn't say I sent it. I think Ursula sent an email to everybody with all the questions that we had come up. Some board members suggested questions. As a matter of fact, I can, if you give me a second, I'll bring it up now. I spoke to Carol Samuel maybe a week ago or a week before that about coordinating getting everybody back on actually selecting a date. The question becomes, I guess, for everybody here is, how do you want to handle that? Do you want a weekend meeting? This is going to be a substantive meeting. This is not going to be something that we do in lieu of a full board meeting. Like, do we cut out a separate day so that we can do this, like on a Wednesday that's not busy, or maybe even a Friday? So I guess that's my question to you. The city already has all the questions. Like I said, I'm just looking for it right now in my search function. Here we go.
Yeah, George, you sent it out to everybody about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's 14 questions, but just to show everybody, so that everybody can see it, let me just share real quick. Microsoft, right? Oh, Microsoft Word, here we go. So this is an example of all the questions that we are asking. Can you see them? Hopefully.
It's coming up.
Okay. They're too small?
You can blow it up a little bit more, but you're talking about somebody who's blind.
All right, let me see. Let me zoom this.
Take it about 120.
Yeah, that's what I was. It's not as easily.
George, all you gotta do is hit it at the bottom where it says 100%.
Oh, at the bottom. Okay, my bad. Yeah. All right, you're right. Is that better?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So just we wanted to ask general questions so that they can help us understand what we do during ULURP and the types of housing that they're attracting or that they want to attract to our district. So, for example, when we were in the office the last time, Michael asked me a question in regards to MIH and what that meant. So I can add that question, but just as this is going to be a forum with HPD and city planning. The first question, please explain zoning and the role it plays in the development of housing. Let me just make this smaller, throughout the district. And city planning has a presentation that they normally do for this for community board members. Many of you, we had 12 community board members. I think it was 2019 that we met at Metropolitan College in 149th Street, and they gave us this presentation. It's not very encompassing, though. It doesn't get to the meat and potatoes of why certain things happen in our district. So, for example, one of the things, I don't know if it's confusing, but a lot of this properties on White Plains Road are one-story taxpayers. The future, or what planning hopes will happen, or what city planning will hope will happen, is that they will be multi-story buildings because they're all along a transit line, and they see our district as one of the districts that they're trying to prime for growth. If you recall, also in the summer of 2019, we had a conversation about Boston Road. City planning is looking on rezoning Boston Road. So those are the types of things here. The second question gets to something, because city planning doesn't actually plan for city homeless shelters, but I actually tried to work, I forget who sent that to me, but I tried to work those questions into another question that we had. Can the zoning text be used to exclude certain types of housing? We have seen the amendments with regards to storage facilities and hotels and manufacturing districts. Why were hotels that are used as homeless shelters excluded from the M11 text amendment on hotels? I think that my personal opinion is that the city is using a very big loophole and actually maybe even working against the law when they use hotels as homeless shelters. You're not allowed to do that. Hotels are transitory. And yes, shelters are transitory, but any stay, according to city law, longer than 30 days is considered permanent. So even though you're in a shelter for 6 months, 7 months, a year, that is still considered permanent, even though it's a transient nature of the hotel. But they shouldn't be using the hotel anyway, because you cannot use hotels for residential purposes. So those are the types of things that I hope city planning can get to us or can speak to when we have this presentation. But like I said, the question becomes, do we want to sit there for, this is, like I said, this is going to be a lot of stuff. So we have to maybe plan for 2 or 3 hours. Again, with the presentation we just had, I don't know if if the full board is there, if more than a quorum shows up, do we have to make this open to the public? I would think that we should, but again, those are all the questions that we should work through, so that when Michael and I are talking to city planning and HPD, we can suggest dates maybe on the weekend in the early morning, because that's less intrusive for people. Or again, one of the days that we have a gap that we're not meeting, that we can meet with them. So that's all I have to say. Sorry.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate that. So executive committee, this is now really up. This is what the meat and potatoes come into place. So as executive officers and committee chairs, this is now open to discussion. What say you? Yes, Beatrice.
I think it merits the time, and we should. If we need to do the 2 or 3 hours, I'm willing to do it whenever is necessary.
I don't think you should play with this. I think you better open it up for a Saturday, invite the public, and call it a day.
Well, I think inviting the public was something that we were going to do anyway, Mr. Hall. I think because it's I think the one thing that we want to be is transparent. I was on Gun Hill Road, about a month ago, and the guy didn't even know about what Alan Bell and them were doing at B&B. And he was like, oh, well, I thought it was going to be such and such. I'm like, hell no. And so again, that's what I'm saying. Just people not knowing. And I think that's what we have a responsibility to get out to the community. So I think that, truth be told, it was always, I think the idea, when George and I were talking about it, was always going to be open to the public. So it was just a matter of the type of forum that we had. In fact, as we discussed it, we want to bring in elected officials. We'd even discussed that. Or do we want to handle it? So I'm seeing where Jerry has gotten the chat, our first vice chair, Saturday from 10 to 1. Does it need to be, from 10 to 2? 10 to 2. I think that, we have questions, but who's to say that members of the community may not have some of the similar questions? So again, this is up for discussion.
That's why I said a Saturday starting at 10 a.m. It could go from 10 to 2. You get a little break
open it up
in the middle of the day, in the middle of it, because it is going to be remote.
That is true. It is going to be remote. Okay.
Yeah.
It is going to be remote.
Dr.
Anybody
Burke,
else?
Yeah, if my mind serves me correctly, the corridor along White Plains Road, most of it is already zoned R5 or R7, and from the last zoning change, because that was the agreement to keep the side streets with 1 and 2 family houses and put the major structures on the main avenues like Gun Hill, 233, Baychester, and White Plains Road. If my memory serves me right, we already can build housing along White Plains Road.
Well, that's not the issue, Mr. Stricker. I think the issue is why I think so. Here's what it is. So you're right. It's actually zoned higher than that because some of that is zoned R7A when you guys took that vote. So it's even higher than R5 and R6. You changed it from that to go to a higher density so that they could put more quote unquote contextual housing up. And so
that was because they wanted to keep the large scale buildings off the side streets.
Right, but that's still happening anyway. So I mean, these developers found the loophole.
I was wondering what kind of rezoning we're going to do when we have the top zoning. I mean, I'm all for the meeting with city planning, but it just piques my interest. If we already have the zoning that we require, what's the story?
So again, Mr. Stricker, I think. Oh, George, you want to say something? Go ahead. Oh, okay.
No, I was just gonna say this is not a request for rezoning. I know I spoke a little bit about Boston Road. That is a request for a future rezoning because right now Boston Road is mostly commercial. You can see that when you drive up and down Boston Road, there's a lot of car uses. White Plains Road, this actually started when I first got to the community board in 2015. With this new administration in 2016, Mayor de Blasio rezoned all the transit districts for ZQA MIH, meaning that they're allowed to go higher than what, or they can build more. They can have increased density FAR if they adhere to certain things. And if you remember correctly, Community Board 12 voted against this. The borough president cut a deal, and then we voted. Well, we always voted against it. I don't think we voted for it. But that happened in 2016. So to Dr. Burke's point, ZQA means that you have less parking. That was the reason why we voted against it. We wanted parking with any new buildings.
I remember that, George.
So and then MIH is we had this conversation. MIH is just another way to say community preference. MIH is mandatory inclusionary housing. That's what it stands for. And there are certain provisions. They do set asides for people who live in that community. It could be 20%, 15%. But even within that zoning concept, there have been recent laws. Councilmember Salamanca from the Bronx recently changed the law or made a law that any unit that receives city subsidy that has 40 or more units in that building, 15% need to be set aside for formerly homeless. So that's any future project, and he did that last year. So any future project that has 40 or more units has to set aside 15% of those units for formerly homeless. Then there are other provisions that Michael spoke to with about 212 Street. So those are all the things that hopefully HPD will answer for us when we come before them.
Okay, thank you, George.
Right, and so this was more of a scoping meeting of sorts, Mr. Stricker. So that's and so George, I appreciate your insight as to explanation. So this is more of a scoping meeting. So I'm hearing Saturday between 10 to 2. Any other discussion on this? This is very important, everybody.
I just think that a Saturday is fine. If we want the public to attend, I think that we have to make sure that we give prior notice to the public so that they could be aware of what the meeting is going to entail.
Oh, without question, Mrs. Bond. I mean, I think that, that's, we want the public there. You know what I mean? So I think the more, once, George locks down the dates, then it's going to be incumbent upon us, the executive committee, and as well as the new members, because I know that they are, and I shout out Mrs. Blair because she's taking the lead on this. But it's incumbent upon us to get that out, so that people will know what's going on, because I think one of the things that I run into is that, there's a guy up on 214th Street says, I'm going to move because I don't like what's happening to our neighborhood and we don't want to get caught out there. I mean, again, it's not that we're against housing. It's, the types of housing. And as I said before, I've been, on the call, and I'm sure that Mr. Hall probably knows this as well, but I think it's for everybody else to get caught up as to what's allowed, what's not allowed, and have your questions answered. So I think if you remember, I was soliciting those questions a while back. And so as you see now, those questions have been tabulated, and then they've now been put into a list. And so now that city planning and HPD has them, they can at least now tailor their presentations to those questions that George showed earlier.
This is March 20th. So.
Are there any other questions regarding this? I mean, because I said this is important. So if we're not, I can move forward. But okay, George says, how's the March 20th sound? So March 20th. I mean, that's fine by me.
All right.
So I need something, board members. I mean, I need something, chairs. March 20th.
You need a motion, Michael?
No, what I need to know. This is just informal right now. I need to know how it sounds for a meeting date.
Sounds good to me.
Good.
So
that gives us four weekends, basically, almost a month from now, to advertise it.
And it's before Easter, because Easter's early this year.
Spring begins.
George, you muted. Easter's early this year.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Easter is April 1st and 2nd. So Holy Thursday is April 1st. Good Friday is 2nd. So this is 2 weeks. The March 20th, then, this gives us 2 weeks before Easter.
Right, because Palm Sunday is 2 weeks after that. So you want to get in before Easter holiday.
Yeah.
So
this is, for full intents, this is St. Patty's Day. St. Patrick's Day is March 17th, which is a Wednesday. So that's what my calendar is telling me, that St. Patrick's Day is on a Wednesday this year. So that frees us up for Saturday, the 20th. I don't know. Is that objectionable?
You know what? I'm just gonna make a decision because I'm hearing. Okay, so it says it's working. I'm looking at Mrs. Vaughn says it's fine. And Jerry says it's fine. And Beatrice says it's fine. Mr. Stricker says it's fine. So March 20th it is, George. So let's make that happen. Tolene just waved her hand and said it's fine. So let's go ahead and make that happen. So March 20th. So where's Miss Sydney Blair? So since she's here, let's see you and Keisha, being that that's her. I need to reach out to her as well. But let's see if we can put together a blurb. And I know somebody else wants and see what we can do about with George on outreach. So can you do that for me, Sydney? Talk with George and Keisha and find out what other forms of outreach we can do other than what we've got. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, great. So let's move forward to the next item. I just want to mention this, and I've mentioned this already, that we have a campaign finance board presentation at the next general board meeting. So I'm going to allot some time for that. Item number 4, committee assignments. So I have requests from the following committees that they need more members. All right. Housing needs more members. Legislative said they need more members. And I think economic development, because some of them about to get booted out, may need more members. Is there anybody else that needs more members? Yes, Beatrice. Not for profit? Okay. Anybody else? Education? Education? All right. Education. What,
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have 2 people who wanted to become new members of the Parks Committee. They're not board members, but they're from the community.
Yes.
Is there something that they have to do in order to make that happen?
No, it would be nice if you could just write them a nice letter. I think what I've tried to do as chair is to welcome everybody and make them feel welcome. I think just like, well, as you know, I tried to, do with your cohort as well. I think that was something that was lacking, when, I joined the board. But if you can just write them a nice note to, welcome them and, just tell them their role as they're obviously a non-voting member because they're not on the board, but they have, all the rights and responsibilities as a committee membership. Okay.
Dr. Burke.
Yes, sir.
I think Ursula also has a form that has to be filled out by the board members.
Regarding what?
You are correct.
Or prospective board members. There's a form that has to be filled out.
Okay.
No, but these are not board members. They're community.
Yeah, I understand. There's a form.
I'm going to the office tomorrow. I'll mail it to each of you.
See, there's a form.
Okay. Oh, wait. Let me just understand what you're saying, Mr. Isaac. So there's a form for non-voting members?
Yes.
Yeah, committee members. You're right.
Okay. No, but he said board. That's why I got confused.
I mean, you know what I'm talking about, the committee member. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Committee. Okay.
Yeah. So the parks. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let me mention this. So I know that economic development did get one new member, Mr. Alfredo Figueroa joined that committee. And I know Ms. Shaniqua Moore asked and requested, to join the not-for-profit committee. So, I didn't have any problems with that. So everybody else, if you want new members, what I'm going to ask you to do is, let me know who you're thinking about, and I can approach them, because as obviously all committee members have to be, appointed by the chair. So let me know who you're thinking about. I know that, Ms. Benitez did that with some of her committee members, and with the exception that, one we're going to talk about in a little bit, one has not been ideal. And so, he's going to be really on thin ice as well. And so, and that's why Alfredo wanted to join. I think that he often brings something to that committee. And so, just take a look at your list. And so I think I have, with the exception of the 2 names I just mentioned, all of your lists should be up to date. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay. And then we can go forward. But if you need new members, just send me a note. I know. So I've got Mr. Hall. I've got you, Carla, and Ms. Benitez. I've got you. Okay. And okay.
Dr. Burke, if I may.
Sure.
What constitutes thin ice? Is that just your synopsis of what's happening, or your
thin ice means not showing up to board meetings? I mean, not showing up to committee meetings.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is I want to provide an update on the removal of the non-participating board members. So, as you know, they had until Friday to send a letter addressed to me to the board office. Now, it just so happened that on Friday, Ursula, myself, and George were in the office, and we did not see any letters from them. I was in the office today. I still have not seen any letters from them. And I know Ursula's going tomorrow, as she just said that she is. So for the most part, as far as I'm concerned, I just recommend that we vote them out at the next board meeting. I mean, because that's the final move anyway, is that we vote them out. They didn't even respond to the letter, which asked them to defend themselves or explain themselves. And that just tells me that they just don't care. I mean, that's just my opinion. If you want to discuss it, we can. But, my recommendation to the commission is that we just move to vote them out.
Dr. Burke, if I may, we had this conversation already. Listen, have a nice day. It's over. We spoke on this. Am I right? We
You're
had
right,
this conversation.
Mr. Hall. We have to follow procedure. We can't just do due process, Mr. Hall. I mean, we can't just not give these members due process. We've got to do things by the book.
You had the due process. When was it? Last month when you brought it to our attention and we talked about it in the
Yes, sir.
consensus
But
opinion.
that's so, Mr. Hall. So here's how the process works. You have to do what we did, right? So you have to bring it to the attention of the board. You have to have their name on the agenda. The board voted on a commission, so the commission was established. You can't just kick people off without giving them a chance to defend themselves, right? I mean, even Trump had the opportunity to defend himself at the MP. I mean, it's Claude's left, but seriously, I mean, you have to give people due process, Mr. Hall. And so
I understand that. But we've done this over a number of years. I'm making a long story short. If you haven't received any notifications or any correspondence by now, what are you going to do?
Well, Mr. Hall,
at this point,
I agree with you, Mr. Hall. What I'm saying is the final process is at the next general board meeting. There's going to be a vote on Ms. Evelyn Christian, Mr. Robert Cumberbatch, and Ms. Mary McLeod, that each one of them have their membership revoked and they'd be expelled from Community Board 12. That's the final step. I mean, but you can't just, I mean, again, the one thing that you will hear George and I talk about is transparency. We can't just do things under the table. We have to do things by the book. I mean, George, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm right.
Dr. Burke, I have to sign off because my phone's dying.
Well, that's okay, because we're done as far as I'm concerned. Let me ask this. Well, some of the things I want to discuss, but I think I will table it unless the first vice chair wants to take this over, because I need to run to another meeting myself. Is that future land use committee considerations, deliberations, and proposals? One thing that I wanted was Mr. Isaac to talk about the hydroponics idea, and George has kind of sort of talked about mandatory inclusionary housing. And the reason that I brought that up is because we're going to be having a land use meeting. Probably these people have already put in the ZAP and the zoning application portal, where they want to look at 241st Street. I'm sorry, they want to look at Furman Avenue. I want to say, what is it, George? 2341 Furman Avenue, which is currently an M11 manufacturing district, and they want us to rezone that to R7 so that they can build affordable housing. So I had ideas as to what could go. I was speaking with Attorney Singh as on ideas as to what we could put there. So, and that's why I asked George about mandatory inclusionary housing, because de Blasio has this particular site designated as an MIH site. And I also want to talk about maybe we could put a medical center there or a farmer's market, back when we talked about in front of Gun Hill Road. So what I'm going to do is this: if we want to continue this discussion, I have to run, but I can leave it to the first vice chair, or we can talk about it next month. So what say the board?
We could table it.
Next month.
Next month? Okay. So, all right. So if that's the case, then I need a motion.
Dr. Burke,
so anyway, think about it. All right.
Dr. Burke, can you hear me?
What's that? Yes.
It's Maria from the Comptroller's office. I just put in our Black History event that's happening tomorrow evening, and some of the honorees are from Community Board 12 area. So I just put it in the chat, and I would love people to attend it. They're all based on education. So from PS21, the principal, we have someone that does citywide work, Mr. Tom Shepard, Issa Taid, and then we also have someone from Co-op City. So I would love you all to share that, and the link is on the chat. But I'm sorry, I know you guys want to end.
Well, not a problem. So actually, that's been sent out already. I think again, the wonderful Ursula Green has sent that out to everybody. It depends. What time is it?
It's from 6 to 7, and people have to RSVP to get the link.
Okay. If I can, I will, try to, be in there. Okay. But I think I have a not-for-profit committee meeting at that time, so I don't know if I'll make. We'll see. Okay.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So, board chairs, I want you guys to think about this. So seriously, we need to really start thinking about what we want, what I would like. I'm be honest with you, I can't make the board you stay, but if we start thinking about what we want in those areas, we don't want to be on the defensive all the time. We want to be offensive. Again, I would love for us to stay and talk about it, but if we're ready to go, you know, so be it. Okay, I'm hearing it. All right, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, ayes have it. All right, so again, so thank you everybody. So I appreciate this is an excellent meeting, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Not a problem. Good night. Good night, everybody. Thank